But what we were doing was we were trying to find folks like Grace, people who would bring in folks from their neighborhood. And then in those meetings, we were doing two things. We were testing Grace's leadership, and then we were bringing in and recruiting more volunteers throughout the state. The next step in the process there was to say, okay, we've now brought in some people and tested some folks. What are we going to do with those leaders? And we broke the state into a bunch of neighborhoods. So instead of sort of the precinct captain model, we moved to what we called Obama Teams model, partly because we didn't think we had enough organizers to manage if we had one person for every precinct. So we brought them together in neighborhoods, and folks like Grace ended up becoming our Obama team leaders. And her job was to take the 5 to 10 precincts that we gave her responsibility for, and to work with our organizers to do the persuasion work that we needed and the GOTV work that we needed in order to win in those areas. And on election day, we had, I think it was 283 neighborhood teams where we had them fully functioning with a volunteer leader, a volunteer team, and over 10,000 volunteers on election day who were able to turn out and knock on the door of every single African American, every single young voter, and every person that we had ID'd in the state 3 times. And that's what we were able to do on the ground, and sort of use that model then in other states. I went on to Maryland and then went to Pennsylvania and ended up in Chicago after the South Carolina primary. And it was there that we, in terms of developing the strategy on the ground or some of the field tactics that we would use in the general, we did interviews with over 200 organizers who had been involved in the multiple states. We talked to all the field directors, the state directors, and we started to put together a plan for what this would look like in the general. And basically we learned a couple of things that I think were key. Number one, that made our campaign, I think, very successful on the ground is training. And really investing in folks like Grace and making sure that this wasn't simply, come in and make phone calls that aren't very quality, but just make a lot of them. It was, we're going to train you from the second that you come into our office how to do this in a quality way, and then how to become a real leader. And if you look at, I happen to look at the Republican strategy from 2004 in the state of Ohio, which is where I am now, and you'll see on there was a lot of very, very systematic training of their volunteer precinct captains. It's something that's worked in the past, and something that I think we did very well in the primaries, and something that all of our organizers said, this is what made us successful. The second thing is that we were close to the ground. And in South Carolina, a small state, we on election day had 37 offices where people had a home. They had a community to go to, somewhere that they could come in and feel part of something. And we had enough organizers because this campaign has said, we're going to invest in this, and we're going to, we can say we're grassroots all we want, but typically what that means is when a campaign says they're grassroots, it means they're not going to put any money into the campaign, or they're just going to let sort of whatever happens on the ground. But what the campaign has committed to from the beginning, from David Plouffe and Steve on down, is that we're going to actually invest in organizing, and to be grassroots, we need to be there in the community. So that was one of the things that we learned and have used in the general as well. The third thing was the focus on the volunteer leadership and to develop people into teams. Because when you have folks out there that are a part of a volunteer team, you start to see they come together in a way that a precinct captain on his or her own aren't able to do in terms of producing things. And also we are able on these teams to give people different responsibilities. So people who are very good at data, who might not have been a very good precinct captain, are now a member of that precinct team, and their responsibility is to really work on the data. And that happens with other skills, or we have faith coordinators on some of these teams. The fourth thing was to integrate the technology to support this. I think you guys, they showed a neighbor-to-neighbor tool training since you all have been here. But that's something that is huge. I mean, the fact that when you sign up on our email list, you're automatically in our voter file in Ohio, and we can follow up with you and know when you signed up and what you're interested in. It's something that no campaign that I've been on before was able to do, and we've now taken it to new levels. On election day in South Carolina, we had an unprecedented number of cell phone numbers, people who had opted in, who we were able to text to say, remember to vote, and people out there who were getting our numbers were texting the numbers back in of the data on election day. And then the fifth thing, and then I'll turn it over to our colleagues up here, is that, and I think in the past, and I particularly found this on the Dean campaign, there tends to be two schools of thought in field organizing. There's the strict accountability model, and then there's a community organizing model. Well, you can't have, in my mind, you can't have one without the other, right? If you have sort of community organizing without strict accountability, goals, people that are held accountable, deadlines that are met every day. You end up having a lot of good organizing and people feel good, but you don't get to where you need to be to win. If you have the other where you're very strict and you're accountable, but people are simply seen as phone bank monkeys who come into the office and that's all they do, you don't get the good things of the community organizing. And so by marrying those two, I think we've been able to create on the ground real volunteer teams that take ownership over their goals, meet those goals, and ultimately win. But then we're leaving something behind. And I'll leave you with one story. In South Carolina, in the same city that Grace is from, in Florence, our 37-year-old, one of our neighborhood team leaders, 37 years old, decided after the primary was over that he wanted to run for mayor. 13-year incumbent in the city of Florence, who he's running against, and everybody said, Steve, that's nice, but you probably shouldn't try to unseat a 13-year incumbent. You've never been involved in politics before, and the Obama campaign was nice, but you're getting a little ahead of yourself. He said, no, you know what, I've been inspired by this, and I'm going to run. So he used our team structure, the people that he had been working with, and other people throughout the city who weren't in his neighborhood who had been involved in the Obama campaign. And I think it was about 3 weeks ago, he won the mayor of Florence by 1 vote. And it's sort of a story that you hardly believe, right? But they recounted it, still 1 vote, and now that mayor is taking it to the Supreme Court of the state. But it shows what we were able to do, which is not only win, but leave something behind so that we can start turning a state like South Carolina blue in the years to come. And I was very fortunate to be able to work with Joy, who's next to me, and I think Joe's going to introduce her. But all of the team stuff that we were able to do there, just to make sure she gets the proper credit for that, was most of it was because of Joy's work as a community organizer and her ability to get us to go in and really analyze what was working and what wasn't working, to develop a structure that ended up being very successful. So I just wanted to make sure I put in that plug before I turn it over.